Alright, so we're back at it again, and I've got a PCB for us all to work on together. This is a Moon Shuttle PCB. Now, as you can see, it's actually pretty dirty. So, we'll clean it later in the video. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some testing to see what could potentially be wrong with this, alright? The only thing I've done to the board off camera was pre-set up the power supply to the edge connector, which is a 44-pin edge connector, and then set up the video output on the 6-pin connector right there. Alright, that's got header pins. I think they're like 0.125 or 0.126 or something like that. They're the smaller pins. But other than that, I haven't done anything. I haven't even powered it up yet. So we're going to power it up together, see what it's doing, and then we're going to go ahead and start kind of doing some various different things around the board. Besides hooking up the harnesses already, I'm not going to be doing anything else off camera besides setting up the camcorder so you can see things a little better. So I'm not going to replace IC chips or anything like that. I mean, at most, if it's a repetitive thing, like if I have to go and clean the IC legs on these sockets or anything like that, I might show you one or two of them and do the rest off camera, but the majority of that is just kind of like understandable. You don't want to see me do this like 15-20 times, okay, the same thing. But other than that, most of the testing and things of that nature we're going to do directly on camera. So I have everything set up, the monitor is plugged in, so is the power supply. Let's power it up and see what happens, okay? Okay, so far there's no smoke, no fire, no nothing. You can kind of hear the sounds a little funky. Sorry about the light in the background. But that's what we got. We got a bunch of garbage on the screen. Okay? So to me, that tells me that the clock is working fine and we aren't having a watchdog issue. It might be something else. I mean, it could still be a watchdog. I doubt it, though, because it's not really resetting. It almost sounds like it's trying to load and run the game, and you get some kind of graphics on the screen. So it's like producing something, it's just not producing what we need to have. Okay? So, with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to set you up on the tripod here, so you will be cut away for a second. But after that, what we're going to do is we're going to start testing a couple things. Like, we're going to make sure that we got the proper 5 volts coming in. Because I did look at it, and the 12 volts that's used on this board is for the sound circuit. So we may still have issues with the sound, but I'm not going to confirm that until we make sure we can at least get the graphics and the game itself working the way it's supposed to be. So I'll set you up on the tripod, and we're going to test the 5 volts, which is right here. It's coming in here from this capacitor, and I believe this one right here is the negative leg and this is the positive, but we'll find out when we put the meter up to it. I just want to make sure that my power supply I'm using for test is actually producing proper voltages and the board is getting its proper voltages. Because if we have that, that's a great start. And then we'll move on to the next one. Alright? So I'll be right back, guys. Okay, so now that we're kind of sort of set up, let me adjust this board a tiny bit for you. And the camera. We'll zoom in a little bit here. Nope. Let's bring it back out. Okay. Now that we're actually adjusted, I'm going to go ahead and power this bad boy back up again. Of course, we still hear that sound from the speaker. what we're going to do is we're going to take our multimeter and we're going to test that little solder pad right here, and then this solder pad right here. And we're going to see what kind of voltage we have coming in. Now this should be our 5-volt rail. Oh, okay, I flipped it around. My bad. This is how it's supposed to be. Negatives right here and positives right there. So let's try and get that hooked here. Of course, you can check the 5-volt directly from the inputs from the power supply too, but I always like to at least get it from the board itself. You could also test the 5-volt going into one of the random IC chips as well. Okay, we're getting 5.1 volts. Let me double check that in reverse. Okay. So yeah. I was originally right. I was being stupid there. Okay, there. Alright, and this is what we're getting. 5.14. That's pretty good, okay? That's more than enough voltage. It's not even overvolting. I mean, it's close, but it's not overvolting. It should work just fine, and we're still getting the same issues, okay? So, what I'm going to do next is we're going to start removing the socketed ICs, okay? I'll power that off real quick. So, like this IC chip right here. Let's see if we can't zoom in real fast. Alright, there we go. It's close enough, I guess. This IC right here. We're going to remove that IC from the socket, and then we're going to clean the legs off if it's dirty. Even if they're not dirty, we're going to give them a little polishing. Again, there's a few ways you can do this. I've shown in other videos, but you can use like an extremely high grit sandpaper. Say like 2, 3, or 4,000 grit sandpaper. Or you can buy a jeweler's file, okay? So, basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and remove this chip. Now again, this is not really the proper way to do it by using a flat blade screwdriver. You should use a IC chip remover, which is like a little clip that grabs on each end and you can wiggle it and pop it straight out, okay? I don't actually own one, mainly because this is how I was taught to do it, and I've always done it this way. You just need to be careful and go back and forth, basically. So if you go right or left, you go the opposite and slowly slide your screwdriver down the shaft of the actual IC, like so. Just like this. Keep it flat. Don't go too quick, don't pull up too high, and boom, look at that. Came right out. No damage. Now, actually looking at the IC though, it's going to be hard for you guys to see it in the video, but those legs are absolutely filthy. They are super tarnished. So, again, you could use a sandpaper, which is what I'm going to do. I'm using 3,000 grit sandpaper. The other thing you can do is get a jeweler's file. And I know there are certain types of cleaners out there that you can soak the legs in and use just a very simple, like, wire brush or a plastic brush. I mean, a really soft material can just, like, wipe it right off, all the tarnish and such. I don't remember the chemical though, so I'm not going to try to mention any of them just because I don't want to have you grab the wrong stuff and then cause a lot of damage to an IC chip. If any of you know the cleaners that are used for dunking your IC chips in to clean the legs off, put it down in the comments. Any of us can know, but I'm going to just take this and take a little of my sandpaper and I'm just going to polish these up, okay? You just want to make sure that all your legs contacts that go into that IC socket are going to be clean. Now, even if you go through all this work and get all these legs cleaned on every single IC, ROM, RAM, whatever you need to clean up, you could still end up having a problem with the physical socket itself. The socket could actually be damaged or having terrible connection. You need to replace it. So just remember that. This isn't a guarantee. Alright, this is just something we try first because it's very simple. There's no reason not to try the simple stuff first. Because you gotta make sure you at least try to get good connection with your sockets and legs and everything in between. Because if you have terrible connection, a lot of your problems can just come from that alone. And you want to make sure to get the insides too, just like I'm doing here, okay? You gotta get those inside legs. If you don't get them, you can cause more connection issues, or additional connection issues. Because these double wiper IC sockets, they're grabbing a hold on both sides, and if you really don't have a good connection on both sides, not saying it wouldn't work, but you could still have an issue with connectivity, and that's problematic. Okay, now that I've got the legs kind of cleaned up, a little polished up and such, I'm going to go ahead. First I'll show you the best I can. I mean, it's not going to be the greatest, I don't have the best camera, but they definitely look a lot better. Than they did before. Okay, you get the idea, alright? So, now I'm going to take some electronics cleaner, the spray, and put it in the socket. This one's empty. Go figure I would throw an empty one out there. Okay, this stuff will evaporate on its own. Everybody has their own opinion on it, but I actually find it to be helpful. It helps me out a lot. I never had any issues with it. Some people I've heard does. But I'll just go ahead and put the IC back into the socket here. Make sure it's nice and squared up. Alright, it's all the way down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing you just saw, but with all of these ROM chips here, and then this sound processor right here. Okay? So I'll get that all done, and then we'll test it another time and see if we need to go to the other board and do the same thing. Okay, we're going to do it all step by step. So we'll be right back. Okay, so now that we've gone through all the stuff we went through before, I want to let you know that I actually canceled a bunch of the parts that I pre-ordered for this game board, because I was bored the other night and started doing a little putzing around with it. And I found the actual issue. I even fixed it. Sort of. I'll show you in a second. But basically, I decided to test these two RAMs out right here with the logic probe. And I found out on this RAM 5A, pin number 12, which is right over here, was not outputting properly. It's supposed to be a data line output, okay? And when I compared it to this RAM at 5B, pin 12 with the logic probe would be flashing rapidly. Well, pin 12 on 5A would stay solid for about 4 to 5 seconds and give it one flash, and stay solid for 4 or 5 more seconds and one flash, and it just kept doing that pattern. So that told me that we're having some kind of issue possibly with this RAM, but then when I jumpered the RAM over it, nothing changed. And again, that doesn't always guarantee that you're going to fix the issue by jumping an IC chip or a RAM over an existing bad one or potentially bad one. But from there, I decided to at least putz around a little bit more, because when I looked at the schematic, I found out that these two RAMs had address lines coming in through our ribbon cables here. So what I did was, on the bottom side board and the top side, I started moving these around, right? And all of a sudden, when I grabbed the bottom part for the bottom board and pushed it down, I ended up getting game. And it was working. So I decided, well, let's just try it out. And I added a little solder to all those pins in there. I didn't add a bunch. It's not even done properly. It's globbed. I just basically wanted to make some kind of a connection. And then when I powered it up, lo and behold, the game worked perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with it at all. So, what we're going to do is fix the bad solder joints that are associated with this connector right here. We're going to reflow all the solder for all 4 connectors, the ones on the video board and the ones on the ROM board, okay? But as you can see here, you can see they're a little shinier. Well, not much shinier, but these have been gone over. And again, they weren't gone over in the proper way. I just globbed on some solder just to fix any potential cracks or hairline fractures or anything like that in the solder joint, and it worked. But this is unacceptable to me because it looks terrible. I'm not gonna lie, it's just awful, and it won't really last that long when you glob it on like that. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna set you up on the tripod, and we're gonna desolder all this, and then we're gonna add fresh solder across it, okay? And we'll do that with all the other ones. We'll do it with this one, and then the 2 others on the other board as well. And then we'll double check it and test it again. So let me get you set up, and we're going to take care of this. Okay, so just like before, we're going to go through with our desoldering braid, and we will remove all this solder from each of the pins, okay? Just like so. And again, you can use a solder pult, or if you have a desoldering gun, that's going to be your best way to do it. But we'll just go one by one, just like you're seeing here, and we'll desolder everything that we can. And when we get done with this, so it kind of looks like this. It's not perfect, but it's good enough in order for me to put on some fresh solder and make it look good. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and do exactly that. It doesn't take very much solder. These pins are really small, so just a little dab will kind of do ya. And just keep the iron on there for a couple seconds, like 1 to 2 seconds. And it helps make sure that it gets that solder down there all the way through the through hole. And we're going to just keep doing this until it looks like this. All the pads have been touched up, and we got some nice, shiny, sharp, beautiful cone solder joints now. So this is going to work beautiful at this point. So the next step is going to be to do this connector here, and then do the 2 on the other board. And once we get done with that, I'll come back with you guys, and we'll work on the next little thing I want to do. It has nothing to do with like repairing the board, because this right here, I guarantee, has already repaired the board. I don't even have to solder these. I'm just doing it for extra insurance because this is all original, and I might as well go through and touch it all up so I know it's going to continue to work in the future. So let me get these all done, and we'll be right back with the next little step for future preventative maintenance. Okay? Be right back, guys. So now that I have all the solder joints redone for all 4 of these connectors, They're nice and shiny, sharp, and nice cone-shaped connections. So we don't have to worry about these anymore. This is going to run just fine with this. I also did the same for this PCB, which is pretty much the main CPU or the main board itself. It has the sound chip right here, you know, and of course the sound circuits and so on. I also want to replace most of the capacitors. As you can already see, I mentioned before I have to replace these caps. This one right here I couldn't replace, unfortunately, because it is a 470 microfarad 25 volt cap. And go figure, the only 470 microfarad caps I have are 16 volts. So I can't replace this one yet. I'll replace it later, and I'll give you a little update when we do another video. I'll just add this to whatever video I do next, once I get the cap. I actually don't think I'm going to sell this board. We're going to go ahead and clean it up and all that kind of stuff, but I might just like package it and store it away and just hang on to it. Who knows, maybe I'll find a cabinet, like an actual dedicated cabinet for this game, or I might build my very own just so I can play the game, because it's actually kind of a cool game. So we'll just have to see what happens. But essentially what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to remove all these chips and stuff, and then we're going to clean it. But before I do all that, I want to show you guys that the game actually works. So let's get this thing hooked back together between the two boards and power it up, and you can see what happens from there. So I'm going to set you up on the tripod, and let's get this bad boy powered up, okay? So we'll see you in just a sec. Okay, so I got the board all hooked back up. Got all the ribbon cables reconnected, got the edge connector on, and the video output connected. So now we're ready to power this bad boy up, and I can show you that it works again. Now I do want to make a quick note that you see this yellow wire here that's jumpered over to here. Okay? Now, this is a ground pin, which is pin number 40. Pin number 40. And it's jumpered over to pin number 20. The reason for this wire is so I can make it a upright style versus a cocktail. So if you have an upright version of Space Shuttle, or Moon Shuttle I mean, you need to jumper a wire from the ground over to pin 20. That's the only way to make it upright. If this wire is missing, then it's going to be in cocktail form, because the dip switch settings don't adjust cocktail to upright. So if you ever have one of these boards and you play two-player and the screens are flipping and you don't have an issue with the IC chips that control that, then you may not have this wire jumpered. So just remember that little key thing, okay? So let's go ahead and power this thing up and see what happens. And look at that. The game works just fine. Now I don't have a control panel hooked up, so I can't like play the game for you, but at the very least I can at least clean it up and start it so you can hear the sounds and whatnot. And there's player 2. It's still in upright form. Okay. Now as you can see, I'm going to turn that off so you don't get distracted by the sound. But as you can see, we made it work. All it was bad solder joints for this ribbon cable on the opposite board, which I believe is the video board. Yeah, it's the video board. And this board here is essentially the ROM board. And it has the sound as well. So that was it. And again, the pinout on this is kind of unique. Like I mentioned, you have to jumper that wire, so you have the upright versus the cocktail version. And it doesn't have your traditional up, down, left, right. It's up, down, and right. The right is used so you can move your space shuttle forward, but you can't go backwards, so on and so forth. And there's a fire button as well. But that's it. We made this game work. Originally I thought it was going to be a lot more of a headache with more chip replacements and so on and so forth, but ultimately it just turned out to be bad connection for that ribbon cable right there. And we just went through and resoldered all the connections for the video board and the ROM board for all 4 ribbon cables, just to have extra insurance, okay? Other than that, that's going to be it, guys. I'm thankful you watched the video. Hope you learned a little something about Moon Shuttle. And I'll see you on the next one, okay? So have a good night, have a great time, and we'll see you again.